box, if you could just introduce yourself, what community you're representing or coming from, that would be and your title, your role in your community. That would be very helpful, and I'll be able to capture that in my little tracker here. The other thing is we can do this a couple different ways. We can kind of start with questions that you have right off the bat, or if it would be helpful for me to kind of do an overview about the initiative, the application, before we do questions, we can also do it that way.
Subin, do you mind if I hop in for a sec?
Sure.
I'm going to recommend, based on the last office hours, that we start with a bit of an overview. That's going to be about 10 or 15 minutes, and that can be really flexible. Folks can hop in with further questions that emerge as we go through. And then we can have some open space to ask questions and talk. And if at any point this is not what you need, please feel free to hop off. We don't want to hold anybody on the Zoom if you're not getting what you need, and we can schedule a follow-up at your convenience. So don't feel like you have to stay for the whole time unless it's helpful to you and the questions from others are prompting your thinking. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great plan. Yeah.
Great. And again, welcome.
Yeah. Aaron Nolich, if you don't know, is an all-star, a leader, and has been a leader in various capacities in school districts. And she is a big kind of driver in terms of how we've adapted early school success to meet the needs of rural communities. So thank you, Aaron. So you're driving, should I be talking, or are we co-doing this?
You go for it and I'll hop in.
Okay, all right, great. As Aaron mentioned, we'll just spend 10 to 15 minutes just doing an overview of the initiative. And the rest of the time will be for you in terms of getting your questions asked, and we will try to answer. Next slide. So this is the Children's Institute team that is specifically focused on early school success. Our Director of Programs, who's currently also our Interim Executive Director for Children's Institute, is Karen Twain. She has decades of experience also in leadership roles, primarily in the Tigard-Tualatin School District. She has a background in counseling, special education, was a principal for many years, and most recently at Tigard-Tualatin was the assistant superintendent there. Marina Merrill, our Director of Research and Strategy. There's me, Subin O. My background's in early childhood education. Tony Yoha, who works on family engagement and coordinates efforts on that front. Aaron Lolich, who I've introduced already, our program implementation specialist. Our amazing Yanni, our program assistant, who does really so much to support our entire team and the effort, and he interfaces a lot with our school districts and the participants and our community partners. And then there's also Laura Labar, our senior program advisor, who does a lot of project management and keeps us all facing in the same direction. Yeah, so I think it would be helpful. Children's Institute has a wonderful communications department who helps us to not only disseminate findings and kind of share the wealth of what we learn in our communities, but they also help us in our work to kind of work with our participants to be able to share or communicate what our work is and how we do our work. And after having shared this video a few different times, Aaron, the way to get the video to share sound is you have to stop sharing screen, and then on the share screen button, there's like the little arrow pointing up, and then you choose, or no, you click share screen, and then there's a button at the bottom that says share computer audio. Do you see what I'm saying? Nice. Yeah. After showing this video a few different times, it goes pretty quickly in terms of how the initiative works. There's a lot of jargon in it. So afterwards, I'll be able to debrief it with you. So even if you have questions, don't worry, I'll be able to answer some of them. All right, let's watch the video.
Okay, give me a second here. I'm not finding it. I think it's under the mute.
So.
There we go.
Oh, you got it?
I think so. Hear it?
No.
You can figure this out. I'm confident.
Yeah, so when you press the green share screen button, and then there's a pop-up that comes up on the bottom left, it says share computer sound. Yeah, and then you click that. Aaron, I'm also happy to do it if that makes sense, if it's okay with you.
Thing for me. Share computer sound. There we go.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, let's start at the beginning. There we go. We did it.
Welcome to Early School Success, the latest initiative from Children's Institute.
We're excited about helping school communities transform the early learning experience for kids, teachers, and families. Grounded in child development and research, early school
Welcome to Early School Success, the latest initiative from Children's Institute.
We're excited about helping school communities transform the early learning experience for kids, teachers, and families. Grounded in child development and research, early school success strengthens the connection between the early years and the early grades. Let's take a look.
First, it's important to have the right folks on board for this work. In addition to the usual suspects, ESS believes that a full range of community perspectives and input are vital to the success of this program. We'll call this group the core team.
Your core team will start by studying the conditions that foster high-quality, developmentally appropriate early learning. You'll also identify areas that may need work. We call these challenges problems of practice, or POPs.
It's important to note that POPs are blame-free, solution-free statements. Here's an example of a POP.
And not a POP.
Now it's time to go fishing. A fishbone, or root cause diagram, is a visual representation of the complexity of your POP. Your team will work to fill these bones with a set of root causes and then tackle one bone, or root cause, at a time.
You'll start by gathering data on your root cause. Quantitative data like test scores or demographic information are important.
As are qualitative data, like the lived experiences of students and families. Including both types of information is needed to formulate relevant, lasting, and supported solutions to your POPs. Have you brought an inclusive and diverse team together, collectively worked to understand your POP and its causes and gather data? Great! You're ready for takeoff! In addition to coming up with change ideas, you'll also need to decide how you'll measure success and set a deadline for when you expect to see an impact from your proposed changes.
Then, in 6 to 8 week cycles, teams will test their change ideas, making adjustments as needed. You may know this rapid response, small scale approach as a PDSA cycle for plan, do, study, act. Once a change idea has demonstrated effectiveness, it will be expanded and adapted to more classrooms and schools. The core team will then go back to their fishbone and tackle the next root cause, repeating the process until all fishbones have been addressed.
Early school success is currently in progress in 2 Oregon school districts. We'll add more cohorts over the next few years, refine our methods, and share our progress.
To learn more and keep up with our work, see our website. Thanks for all you do to make Oregon a great place to learn.
All right, so if anyone wants to hire me for voice acting, my agent's contact information will be sent separately. No, I'm joking. Yeah, so I know that that video might be stark or striking or contrasting from maybe what most people are expecting, where we have been and worked in early learning policy and advocacy for such a long time, as well as doing programs work over the last 10 years. You know, where, you know, in that video, where do we work on early learning, right? And how does that work? The reason why we've landed on this process and this manner of facilitation is that something that we realized in our Oregon schools, and having done research and design efforts across the country, is that the conditions for implementing early learning in school districts are rarely all there. They might have bits and pieces, you might have some strengths to kind of work with and build on, but it's rarely all there. And what we've learned is that in order for early learning efforts to be impactful and sustainable for them to last, we really need a system-wide kind of change in effort. So do we talk about early learning and early school success? Absolutely. Is there professional development? Yes, tons of it. Is there discussion around coaching, curriculum, and instructional practices, family engagement? Absolutely. But the kind of the meat and potatoes of the work is in facilitating continuous improvement. So you might have seen or heard of other efforts, whether it's your regional education network, the Educator Advancement Council, other, you know, the work of improvement research and improvement sciences becoming more and more popular in school districts. That is the approach that we're working with. And something that we definitely believe, something that is core to our values, is that we're not coming in and telling people what they're doing wrong and what they need to fix, right? Our true belief is that the people who are closest to the problems have the best ideas for the solutions. They just need to be facilitated in that conversation. And so that's that first bullet point right there. Analyze and define district and teacher strengths, needs, challenges, existing resources, and instructional practice. And that doesn't just happen through, you know, wishy-washy conversations and things like that. There might be some of that, but there will be a rigorous and validated approach using and count, where we kind of lean on our evaluation partners, which are currently with Portland State University, to kind of put in measures of implementation that help us to understand whether or not our ideas, our changes to the system, whether or not they are effective. Designing and testing approach is something that we've recognized and realized is that when we've all been a part of big ideas that go system-wide, they go across the district, across the school, wherever it is, and it doesn't stick, it doesn't work. And something that has not happened, one of the primary reasons is it wasn't ever tested for implementation. And that's that second bullet point there. So we facilitate that process. And the third building is planning that implementation. So really what you're signing up for, what you're applying for, is for CI to come in as a thought partner. And, you know, we have the kind of the capacity, the perspective and viewpoint where we like to think of ourselves as connectors, people who can connect people to not just ideas and resources, but to people. And so, yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. I feel like I'm talking too much. Yeah, so
Maybe we could pause for a second, see if there are questions so far.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna look at your faces.
And I'm gonna look at the chat box.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good to keep going here, Stephen.
All right, great. So this next slide is helping us to kind of determine eligibility for the application process. How are we defining rural? And and I'll get into this other question, why rural as well. But any geographic area in Oregon, 10 or more miles from the centroid, what a term, from the centroid of a population center of 40,000 people or more. And you can click on the link. This slide deck will belong to you. If you have questions as to whether or not your district meets this definition, you click on that link and you should be able to figure out what you need. In terms of why rural and why we're focusing on rural, just really briefly, is something that we recognized in the last application process, is that the program design and the way that we were doing the application, we were recognizing that the needs of rural are and all really every community is unique, but especially so in rural. And so we know that we need to be adapting our program implementation, recognizing the kind of specific factors that are going on in rural. Okay, let's go to the next slide. We have heard before that people are really interested in applying as a community-driven network. Another term for this is a networked improvement community, if you're familiar with the Carnegie Foundation research. And so the answer is yes, you can apply as a network. And that would, in order to do that, something that you'll have to do is name a coordinating agency or district. And also the implication of applying as a network is that you'll have to kind of share the funding. That being said, we have heard from multiple districts and multiple potential networks that the sharing the funding is exactly what they want to do. That's kind of why they want to do it. So in terms of thinking about a coordinating agency or district, or I'm sorry, an example of a network could include your ESD, community college or community organization that you're partnering with, or it could be 3 neighboring districts. We have an example of that with Yoncalla in Southern Oregon, which is one of our early work sites in Children's Institute. Just wanted to mention that at any point you can drop questions, comments. You can laugh at my jokes in the chat box at any moment. And also there will be a Q&A at the end. So how did Children's Institute design this process? So prior to the first year of implementation of early school success, Children's Institute went on a year-long journey, research and design year, where we worked with a senior advisor who recently passed away, Ruby Takanishi. Many think of her as the kind of the founding mother of the P3 movement, P3 alignment movement. Very influential in our thinking, and something that she helped us to kind of think about was who were the kind of the landmark milestone pioneering districts across the country who are really working on early learning well in terms of school districts. And something that she pointed us to a number of districts, Boston and Chicago and Oklahoma. There were so many different school districts. We also looked at literature, research. We looked at rural districts. We looked for examples of rural districts that were looking at early learning alignment. And so we did that research and design, but we also spent half of that year looking inside of Oregon. We looked at the districts, we talked to superintendents, teachers, state agency representatives, community partners, and tried to understand what were some of the challenges in terms of implementing early learning, getting early learning off the ground. How come when some schools are doing preschool, it feels like preschool and the rest of the school are like 2 different universes? What's going on there? So we were really trying to understand what were some of the issues. And that led us to kind of putting together a design team, an advisory group, multiple sort of activities that led us to the design of early school success. After having implemented for a year and understanding how it went in the first application process, we began to understand, again, as I mentioned before, that the needs of rural are unique. And we really need to be thinking about implementation in rural in a very specific, contextualized, pragmatic way. And so, yeah, that's where we are right now.
Subin, do you mind if I walk through the timeline and the process?
Not at all. Yeah, please.
Wonderful. Thanks. Okay. So you're here and you are probably aware that if you're interested in submitting a letter of interest, that will be due on January 15th by the end of the day. We'll screen those letters of interest and we'll announce which districts are moving on to the second phase by February 12th. We think that'll be somewhere in the range of 3 to 7 districts or community-driven networks that will move on to phase 2. That's assuming we get that many applications, which right now we really don't have a good sense of. And by the way, there are about 160 school districts in Oregon who meet the Office of Rural Health definition of rural. So the opportunity has gone out to every rural school district that is eligible. The second phase of application is due February 19th. The second phase is a light written application and a heavy interview process. And what I mean by that is that we're going to conduct Zoom interviews with key players in the early learning work in your community. So that would be the superintendent, the elementary principal or principals, an early learning director, if there is an early learning director partner, and then if there are other partners or community organizations, we would also interview them, a small group of parents, and a small group of teachers that represent early learning through probably about second grade. So those interviews we imagine to be 30 to 60 minutes at most. Like I said, conducted by Zoom. After we get through that second phase of reviewing the written applications and the interviews, then we will announce the third phase applicants. We imagine that to be 1 to 3 finalists at the very most. And originally we had hopes to conduct site visits, get to know the community, get to know all the people involved in person, and right now that is a question mark for us. That's a kind of a yet to be determined phase of the work, but there will be some kind of final gathering, might be a virtual gathering before we make our final announcement at the end of April. The timing is designed at the end of April, is designed so that we have an opportunity to work with you to form a team and to get some dates on the calendar before everyone scatters for summer break, so that when you come back in August or September, you feel like you've got a team, you know kind of what to expect, and we're ready to begin the work together. I'm going to back up just a little bit and talk about the letter of interest and then the second phase application. Oh, actually, I have more detail coming, so I'm not going to back up quite yet. That's yet to come. Okay, so the letter of interest includes a district partnership profile. That's really basic information like contacts, what's your preschool budget, if you have a preschool budget, some pretty straightforward information to capture for us. And then we do ask a couple of key questions and ask that you submit a response that's no more than, I think 1,200 words is the limit on each of those. So 3 questions, a little bit of background information, and then signed statements of commitment. We've drafted those commitments for you, so you know what you're committing to, and really all we're looking for is a signature to know that key people in your community are aware of what you're applying for and are committed to the application process. We also let you know in the letter of interest that we will be pulling publicly available data about your school district community. And it's things that we would find on your school profile or district profile from ODE, We look at teacher retention rates, teacher and principal retention rates, your Oregon kindergarten assessment data, etc. We are going to take that data with a big grain of salt. We know that the data doesn't tell the whole story. And so there is an opportunity to provide some context about that data if you would like to. And that's explained in the letter of interest. But we know it's point in time. We know it's a really weird time to collect data. And we also know that you collecting the data is an undue burden right now. So that's why we're collecting it. And we'll do the review, and you won't have to collect data for the application process. Let's see, what am I forgetting? I think those are the, oh, and then the budget description. In the letter of interest, we ask for, I think, no more than 250 words, just to get your initial thinking about how you might use the funds. We're not asking for an actual budget at this point, just some initial thoughts about how you would use the funds. I mentioned that there will be interviews in phase 2, and here you can see the different groups we plan to interview. And then we have this phase 2 information submission. Again, we have, I think, a total of 3 questions. And this time we do ask you to submit an actual budget to go along with your previous narrative. And then the on-site review, what our original intentions were to meet with all the folks we interviewed via Zoom, and just get an opportunity to see your community in person and get to know you and build relationships, observe some classrooms, gather further context before we make our final decision. Here's the question you've really been waiting for. How much money is it, and what can we use it for? So the grant award is $30,000 to $60,000 per year. That is true if you apply as a single district, or if you apply as a community-driven network. And that range, I think, will be determined by your application, what you state your needs are, who your partners are, and I think those are kind of the big pieces that will make that determination about, is it 30 or is it 60? And right now we have funds for 3 years of this grant. We also have some funders who seem interested in continuing funding beyond the 3 years. So we're hopeful. In terms of acceptable use of funds, I think the key idea for those of you who live in the K-12 world is we're looking for supplement, not supplant. So if you want to use the funds to hire somebody to manage the early learning work that you're doing, there's not enough funds probably for a full-time person, but you could certainly hire someone or have someone where you identify some funds to support part of their existing role so that they could now project manage. If your team goes through the process that we described in the video, and through that process identifies that classroom materials are needed to refresh some instructional approaches, you can definitely do that. And then resources to strengthen family engagement, same thing. Basically, if your team comes together and says, this is a need we've identified, this is how we want to use the funds, you are most welcome to do that. There's not enough money to fund a preschool teacher. It's also not a sustainable funding source. Curriculum adoption is something you would be doing anyway, or maybe not doing anyway if you don't have the funds available. So that wouldn't be an acceptable use of funds. And you wouldn't fund something like extended contract for teachers to attend back to school night if that's something that you typically do year over year. I'm gonna pause and let you ask any questions about funds. Subin, anything you want to add or anything you see in the chat?
Yeah, I mean, something that we definitely recognize and realize, having talked to many rural districts, is that resources are always an issue, right? In terms of, it's quite common we hear that our principal is also the bus driver and the basketball coach, and like kind of issues like that where we're just trying to build capacity, right? And something that one of the reasons why we're not setting aside the funding for like an early learning teacher or an early learning director or something like that is that this is a 3-year initiative focused on systems change and improvement. And after that, we want the change to be durable and we want it to sustain beyond that. And so if we were using the funds to, as I like what Aaron said about supplement, not supplant, if we were to supplant that funding and then we would, you'd be in trouble 3 years later, right? In terms of continuing that progress. So that's kind of why we were thinking of it in that way.
Thanks, Subin. Okay, and then the last piece is what else do you get except for money, or in addition to money? You get ample. It's funny we call it technical assistance because I feel like a lot of what we provide is actually pretty adaptive and not as technical, but we bring both technical and adaptive assistance to teams. We provide coaching, we provide content and resources. We bring our Portland State evaluation team, which means we can gather data and research in ways that most school districts just don't have the capacity to do. We also provide really tailored support related to alignment of early learning through elementary programs. And then we provide this network of other schools and districts like Yoncalla and David Douglas School District and Forest Grove School District and Beaverton, who are in the work at a variety of stages, who can be really helpful. And then we also have, we have a local network. We also have a lot of national contacts that we can help broker connections and provide additional supports as needed. And here is the link to the application, and here is my contact information. And you are welcome to reach out at any time if it would be helpful to have a more individual conversation. But at this point, I'm going to stop talking and stop screen sharing and just open it up. And Subin and I will do our best to answer your questions.
I think I'll start with some questions that I've been answering in the chat. So if there's anyone who's just joining by phone, they can either look at the chat or I can just say it out loud. So one of the questions was, Brian is interested in implementing an early learning program. Will this program assist us or not? Absolutely. That's what this program is designed to do, is to assist in the implementation of an early learning program. But to give a little more context to the question that I typed in the chat, what we're also looking for is that like kind of the core programming or that early learning is kind of already underway, and that we're helping to improve upon it and making sure that it's aligned in a seamless experience from preschool up through elementary. So we're really trying to kind of, again, be thought partners in like a durable implementation of early learning. Hope that answers your question. Feel free to follow up if I did not. How many grants will you award? We'll be working with 2 new districts or networks if you apply as a network in the upcoming year. Would intervention programs be acceptable usage that were used to complement the core program? It really depends, Megan. So part of, in that video, I know it kind of went fast, part of that first initial stage of early school success is CI bringing together what we're calling a core team and identifying, again, jargon, identifying a problem of practice, right? Identifying something to work on. And as we identify that, we may uncover, oh, we need this intervention program. This is the thing that is going to help us with our problem. Or we may find out through that work and through that data collection that actually this intervention program isn't the thing that we need. In fact, we need some other things. At that point, yeah, there may be funding to kind of assist in purchasing for things like that. I hope that I'm answering your questions. Yeah. Would a preschool partner need to be private school, or would Head Start be an appropriate preschool partner? It really depends on the community. I know every community is different, and some are partnering with private preschool, some are partnering with their Head Start. It really depends on the community. We are looking that in early school success, that we are looking for that preschool through elementary connection. That's like kind of a core feature of the work that we're trying to do.
Sure.
So we're hoping that that one of your partners, if you're applying as a network, is the school district. How am I doing, Erin?
Doing great.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, preschool, school, and district are all the same. I see. I'm hoping we will just need one letter of commitment since the director and superintendent is the same. Yep, that is correct. Yeah, and in that letter, you would just state that the preschool, the director, the one who's wearing 3 different hats at once, just writes one letter. Yeah, and states their role. Their multiple roles.
And likewise, one interview, we may add a couple questions if you're playing a dual role, but we're not going to ask you to sit through multiple interviews.
I have a question. Sorry, I meant to unmute myself and I think I unvideoed myself. So I apologize in advance. I just heard about this entire thing yesterday, so it is entirely new to me. I kind of gather what it is here. So I'm a preschool provider of an in-home preschool, and so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly what this would kind of look like for us. We aren't technically associated with our school district because we're private, but we work closely with our early learning hub, and we have in the past looked into pursuing like a bridging the gap type of thing between us and the kindergarten. Unfortunately, that was kind of dropped because it was going to be implemented right when COVID hit. So we haven't actually really worked with the elementary schools in our district other than like providing referrals for kids that have IEPs, and we do take after school kids. So I'm just kind of wondering, if our school district receives the grant, how would that look as far as partnering with preschool programs? Is it like, I know that some school districts offer preschool, but then there's multiple in-home preschools in our district. So would that be including like any of the in-homes that want to participate, or is it like a pick one preschool program and work with them? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. I'm gonna paint a picture, and just please, everyone on the call, recognize that all I'm doing is creating an example, right? It's not like the example. It's not like the thing that you would do. And I don't know your community and your context well enough anyways to say like what you should do, right? Let's imagine in your situation that there's an elementary school and there are multiple or maybe just one in-home provider or other, because Preschool Promise is a mixed delivery approach that you'll see other preschool providers, maybe a Head Start is getting up in that business, and you're applying as a network, right? Because that's how you would have to apply. You would have to apply as a network. Then, and part of what you're trying to do, because I think the activities that you were describing are really specifically about kindergarten transition. They're the kinds of things that you would do to make sure that kindergarten transition happens well, that it feels like a seamless kind of process. what early school success is kind of looking at is what happens beyond kindergarten transition, right? Like what is the overall kind of experience for a child, not just for a child, but for families, from preschool all the way up through the early elementary grades. And so really what it might look like, this is where I start painting a picture, right? What it might look like is that there's a core team that gets put together, and you're a member of that core team, and that you, and along with the elementary teachers, are saying, hey, let's make sure our curriculum is the same or similar. Let's make sure that our practices kind of look the same. Hey, you know that social emotional strategy you're using? Let's make sure we're doing the same thing so that when they show up in kindergarten, you're using the same language that I'm using, you know, like, so that's what that might look like in your community, in your context. And I don't know how many schools are in your district, but we would also want to think about all the schools in that district. Does that answer your question, Haley?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I just I'd been forwarded the information and it was a little murky for me because I've applied for grants in the past, but that was just for our program. So it wasn't so much working as a network, but I think that answers that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and so anyone who's interested or thinking about applying for a network, we will, like in that phase 1 that Erin was showing, something that we would really be looking at in those letters is like, how strong is that connection, that partnership, that commitment? Like, how tight is that partnership? And so, yeah, we would be looking for that.
Well, and I suppose I do have one other question kind of related to that. I have been told, and I don't know if this is just specific to early learning, but I've been told through my CCR&R that you can only be part of one network. So I don't know if that is something that would hinder us from participating in this.
Yeah, I'm not sure what network your CCR&R is referencing there. It's something related to their work.
Okay.
And I would look into it. I would look into it and see if that's like kind of the natural place to kind of create, rather than recreating a network or something like that. But in terms of applying for this, we're using the word network a little loosely. I think the school districts can, you know, and you would be able to determine who your network is. And I think Erin has that slide there of like, every network is going to apply differently. You know, it's going to look differently depending on your community.
Right. And the beauty of us being a private nonprofit is we don't have those rules and regulations like different state agencies might.
So this is essentially, the grant would be for the network, and then amongst yourselves, you would determine where the funding goes based on the allocation requirements.
Sort of, yeah. I think going back to, I forget whose question I was answering in the chat, is that work of like bringing the team together and identifying a problem to work on, that through that we would determine like, okay, we need some funding, like some supplemental funding that will help us to get like through this problem, right? That will help us to solve this problem. So what does that look like? What's it like an explicit example? So for example, in one of our school districts, they're working on something called like playful inquiry, like an inquiry-based approach to education, and something that they really needed that was really going to help them to kind of get them over the hump was doing some professional development, right? And they wanted some professional development from one of the original authors, right? And so oh, sorry. Yeah, okay, there we go. So we were able to kind of use some of the funding to bring in that professional development, but not just professional development, because we know that professional development doesn't lead to good implementation, but also use the funding for the planning that comes afterwards, right? We've all done professional development and say, okay, what now, right? The planning afterwards is where all the magic happens. And so that was like how they used their funds.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oops. Keep thinking I'm muting myself.
No problem. All right. Any other questions? All right, so we don't need to stare at each other, although we can. I can also sing songs. But these are office hours, so we are here and available. I'll just kind of prompt every few minutes in the chat box if anyone else has any other questions. We're just going to be available. If you want to private chat, either Erin Lolich or me, that is an option. If you want to reach out to us individually, that's also an option. Erin gave you her email address. She would be your primary contact there. Yeah, thank you.
One other piece I'll say that I think is important, having spent most of my time in your shoes, in the K-12 world, instead of in the nonprofit world, and having been involved in a lot of different grants over the years, this grant is pretty high touch. You see us a lot. We meet a lot. What I think is unique about this grant is that in past grants, I've had the grantors be kind of high touch or low touch. And the high touch grantors are constantly looking for reporting and information and want to know how much progress you're making. And, could you send them X, Y, Z? That is not how we approach the work at all. Our high touch is working with you side by side. So when we meet, we're actually engaging in the problem of practice with you. We're sharing resources, we're brainstorming and problem solving with you and with your team. So I would want to know, and I don't think we say it explicitly in the application process, that that the commitment is a significant one in terms of time, and it is time doing the work. So if this is the work that you want to do and align your early learning and elementary programs, I think it'll be a really good fit for you. But if you don't think you have a team that can make that time commitment next year, it'll be a good thing to discuss and consider before you apply or while you're applying.
What kind of time commitment have you experienced previously for the networks? What does that usually look like?
We usually meet with our school teams once per month, and we usually meet with our district teams weekly. So
okay.
For example, in Forest Grove, we meet with their principals and their early learning director for about an hour a week. When we meet with each school team, it could be, usually it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
There I go again. That's not my mute. Well, I think I'm going to hop off and touch base with my potential network. I really appreciate all of your time and answering my questions. Thank you.
Really. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy
Take care.
holidays to
Happy
you
holidays.
as well.
My name is Abby Couture. I'm principal at Clemens Primary School in Philomath, also the early learning director, and I work closely with a company within my school, Strengthening Rural Families, and they're both on here. I know we had a couple questions as we work through this process of applying. One of the ideas, and you mentioned a little bit about not using it for teacher salaries because it's not sustainable over the course of time unless the district or somebody could take over that cost. One of the questions I had in the process is, especially as we look at Preschool Promise grants, one of the expectations there is to have teachers with a degree and paid like a teacher. Is that something you are looking for or taking that into consideration in the application?
Again, I think it'll kind of depend on the the implementation of your early learning network, right? Because I assume, I don't know if your preschool promise program is part of your school district or if you're partnering with a, an in-home provider or private center or something like that. Sometimes, or for many of our preschool promise programs, they meet many of the requirements, and some of them are like expected to happen. And one of those is usually the salary requirement, right? I forget. Exception is the term that they use. And if that's the kind of the situation that you're in, and that's how you're kind of applying, that we're not necessarily going to ding you points for that or something like that in terms of your application. But what we would want to understand is like, what is like the future vision, and what is your hopes and dreams for how that early learning program becomes one with the school and with the school district. We have some school districts where there is a kind of a salary difference between the preschool teachers and the elementary school teachers. And one of the questions that we have is, will that preschool teacher ever really feel like a true partner with the elementary school teachers if there's that huge salary difference? And so that's really that's the actual question that we would want to answer. And so not necessarily whether or not, the salary requirement is there. Does that answer your question?
It does. That I, having in the past been a preschool teacher,
Yeah,
remember as you're trying to align and work with the other grades, that is a huge component. And so
yeah.
I really wanted to be thoughtful of that.
Yeah,
Paul,
there's a powered, yes, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
It's okay, I'm sorry. Paul, did you have any more questions?
Yeah, I had a couple actually. So I guess I want a clarification on how hard the line is relative to funding the actual early childhood educators. One of our problems of practice actually is moving from a dosage that's lower to moving from that to a dosage that's higher and more inclusive of a broader developmental age range. Right now, we're running more of a kindergarten readiness program that's just for the kids that would be, aging up into kindergarten. So it's interesting to me because it seems to be focused much more on the system and the container, but not at all driven by increasing the amount of availability of service to actual kids.
Right. Yeah.
Frankly, that's my bias. My bias is, how do we get more services to kids and families?
Totally.
So, it may just be, this isn't the right fit exactly, but that really is a true problem in practice for us, right? Which is, we have a certain amount of, we have what I think is a well-established collaboration, but the funding is also the other problem in practice, right? It's always the other problem in practice.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if there's room in that, because for us, the key to increasing dosage is actually having the money to do so.
Yeah. And actually, I would say that there is not a single district where we're working with where increasing access isn't part of their problem of practice. Every single school district that we're working with is interested in working on that, including our biggest one, Beaverton School District, right? And I would say that while these funds, the funds that we're providing, aren't necessarily like directly for increasing seats, right? Increasing access. What we have done with actually both of our early school success partners in Beaverton and Forest Grove is we used the planning, right? The implementation grant, the grant, the way that it's designed to apply for Preschool Promise. And in our assistance, we were both successful with Beaverton and in Forest Grove in increasing their, I think Forest Grove got the largest Preschool Promise grant in the state. And Beaverton got a very large one as well. And so we provided that kind of assistance to again, what we don't want to do is say like, okay, we want to spend the $60,000 here to like get a teacher or pay for a part-time teacher or something like that. And then after 3 years, it's gone, right? That money's gone. But what we would rather do is, how can we help you to to create the conditions for a sustainable and durable source of funding, right? That is something that we have been successful in helping other school districts do. So I imagine that increasing access for any school district that we work with, that will be part of their problem of practice. But in addition to increasing access, like, I think this is helpful to kind of also put this on the table, is that increasing access into what, right? Like, what is the program? Like, how else can we create the program so that it's, again, all those other things that we were talking about, developmentally appropriate, aligned with elementary education, a seamless experience with elementary. So it may not have like kind of the immediate sort of impact that you're looking for, but again, like I said, in with Beaverton and Forest Grove, both of them in year 2, we were able to kind of secure funding with them. I can't make that promise. I can't say like that's exactly what we're going to do and it's going to happen for you. I can't make a guarantee, but I do know that that is something that we've done with every district we've ever worked with.
Yeah, that's a conversation we've been having about trying to become a Preschool Promise, you know, have a Preschool Promise classroom here in this facility as well. I do have to, as a small nonprofit executive director, it's kind of funny to me that you talk about 3 years of funding as not durable or sustainable, because in my world, you know,
yeah, that's a
3
long
years
grant.
of funding is the exception, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. No, point taken for sure. Yeah, that is a longer grant than usual. Absolutely. But, you know, I think we, you know, these are philanthropic funds that are kind of resourcing our efforts. And what we would want is to make sure that these are public funds that are definitely more, I would say, more durable, more sustainable. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I mean, I see some real benefits in the approach. Do you guys have any sense of, you said you're funding 2 schools or districts in the coming year. You have any sense of application numbers, or is it too early in the process to know that?
I think it's too early to know. I think we've had touch points with 30 to 40 districts at this point. But I don't know that those touch points are going to result in applications.
Abby, do you have any
received any so far.
Yeah.
Something I didn't say to, something I didn't say to everyone else that I really should have said from the beginning is that part of this application process and part of this office hours is figuring out whether you want to work with us, right? Like, it's like kind of like dating, right? We're trying to figure out, is this going to work, you know? And so, so this is, I appreciate your question, whether you're figuring out like, is this going to meet the goals that we're trying to, that you've already articulated?
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Likewise.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for your interest.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Darlene and Teresa, do you have any further questions before we end the Zoom?
I just want to thank you for all of the information. I feel like all of my questions are answered, and I really appreciate the document and all the links, and I'm going to thoroughly go through it. And if I have any questions, I'll email. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Happy holidays.
You too. You too. Take care. Have a good holiday. Yeah.
Bye-bye now.
Bye. Okay. Hi, Yanni. Should we save the chat? Is there anything from the chat that would be helpful to have a record of?
Since I'm recording, everything automatically saves the video, chat, everything saves. So I'll have a copy.
Oh, it does? Nice.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about the tracking sheet, the question column about whether or not we need to kind of add those things there, but yeah.
One question I have is there anything burning that we should add to the slide deck that seemed like was a theme that was missing from the slide deck?
No, if anything, I apologize. The slide deck is amazing. I did not like pre-process like right before, because we were with Cornelius and everything.
Yeah.
So I didn't pre-process, and so I was like all over the place. So I'm sorry, Erin. I messed up your slide deck. Sorry.
You're fine. Yeah, can you stop recording, please?